push for state police gathered momentum on Wednesday as newly sworn-in Inspector General of Police Tunji Disu inaugurated a committee to develop a framework for its implementation. Now, during the occasion, the IGP declared that decentralized policing has come to stay. The move comes amid renewed national debate and repeated calls for state police, as well as President Bola Tinubu's recent charge to the National Assembly to amend the 1999 Constitution to accommodate it as part of broader security reforms. How significant will this steering committee set up by the Inspector General of Police be to the process of decentralizing Nigeria's policing system? Well, Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Amadi, joins us now to share his opinion with us. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
So, Dr. Amadi, how significant, is this move by the IGP? Do you see the steering committee as genuine institutional step towards reform, or is it more of a consultative exercise?
Well, for now it would be too early to prejudge because first we'll see how they work. But again, it's important to remark that police decentralization, no matter the form it takes, it's not the same thing as state police. There's some confusion here. State police, in the sense of police that the state owns, runs, and manages or maintains, distinct from a federal police that has jurisdiction over federal offenses usually and federalized intervention based on circumstances. So there exists in many jurisdictions where you have it, two distinct police authorities: the state police, the federal police, and in many cases, municipal police. So oftentimes, many in the police hierarchy, past and present, usually think about decentralization. So many critics of Nigerian police force highlight over centralization as one of its weakness. It fits into operational inefficiency. So that is a police reform, forced into police reform bracket. How do we make the federal police more effective? How do we localize their operations? How do we make sure they connect to the community and develop intelligence? Now, these are kind of things that maybe this committee will look at: structuring, restructuring, administrative control, operational control, political authority, staffing, hierarchy, and so on and so forth. But the advocacy for state police is not for a centralized police. It's about a distinct police lying together with the federal police, having clear jurisdiction over it flows from the legislative competence of the state, as shown in the concurrent list of to the Constitution. And if you look at the debate before the 1960, precisely captured by the 1958 Willis Commission report, when at the eve of Nigerian independence, agitation by minorities, concerns about political victimization, an argument came back about state police, and the recommendation of that august body was to say that we keep the federal police for like 2, 3 years, 4 years, within which we work out the modality to have state police. So this committee really, the question is, are they advising the Inspector General of Police how to restructure the Nigerian police force into 36, 37 different police forces or police force institutions that will have state-based power and state-based infrastructure and jurisdiction, lying together with whatever rump or rubric or leftover of what will now become the federal police, perhaps having responsibility over the FCT and interstate and other forms of, like the FBI, perhaps doing investigations for federal offenses. So these are some of the issues that are not clear, and so one could say that this is perhaps another institutional response by the police trying to perhaps go before, be proactive, and reshape the dynamics. The Nigerian police and its leadership are not usually favorable to the idea of the real state police that we talk about. So in a cynical way, we could argue that this is the IG getting ahead and reshaping what may come out of this seeming President Tinubu's commitment to state police. So it might end up to be agenda setting, but clarity is needed. I would not have it right now.
Well, they'd also need to look into the mass corruption, compromise, and the loss of public trust that the police force has endured in the last decade or more. Well, the constitution of this committee traditionally, we know that IGPs have been a little bit wary of state police as it dilutes federal authority. How significant is it that the office of the IGP is actually the one heading this planning committee? Do you think that's going to manage, streamline the egos a little bit better?
Well, that's why it seems to me that we might get something less than what many advocates of police, state police, may be arguing for. So, like I already pointed out, the police hierarchy have been less tolerant of the idea because it means there will be there'll be less, a federal police chief that doesn't have that power anymore if you go to the real police force. So two quick things. One is the imperative for state police is different, may converge, but not the same as the imperative for police reform. So people confuse it. The argument may seem converge at some point. So for the police chiefs, every police chief has a pet project. Some drive on human rights, some drive on rebranding, different things. But maybe the DISO, IG, Inspector General of Police, has zeroed in on what may be very popular, which is state police. But he may be going around it in a manner around how do we make the Nigerian police more decentralized. That seemed to me to be the only context in which the police itself will lead this conversation. What should happen properly is the federal government, perhaps, and the state government under the National Economic Council setting up a committee to look at modalities of state police, because ultimately to fit into a constitutional reform. And the question will now be, what form should it be? Should it be a state police that has more power and the federal police just have tangential power relating to federal offenses? And by the way, we record that much of the offenses in Nigeria are under the criminal code or penal code, and criminal code and penal code are state laws, not federal law. So it means that the bulk of the work the police do today are within the state jurisdiction. And so if you have a state police, the federal police are going to be maybe out of work. So what happens again to the huge human capital, human manpower? Is this committee, one can argue in their favor that this committee might now be working out on how do we transition these police officers, men and officers, to various states police authorities as they may develop. So it might be a committee to look at how the Nigerian police will eventually administratively transform into state police when the politicians and the legislators come out with a model in the constitution. So to be fair, on the positive side, we might say the IG is thinking proactively and saying, ultimately, we're not going to borrow people from the Mars, from the moon. We're going to be these trained police officers who will fit into the new state police. So how do we then begin to think about dimensioning, restructuring these guys, transitioning them so that when the deal is done, we have a police from a managerial, human resource, administrative point of view, we're ready to become state police officers as against federal police. So that might be what this committee really should be looking at. But essentially, the real work has to be political and policy-wise. And it's not the domain of the IG to do that work. It's the domain of the chief executives, the governors, the president, the National Assembly, to design something that fits ultimately into a new constitutional reform, which we would probably talk about relationship between the federal and the state. What's the jurisdictional, the law enforcement ambit of each of them? How do they collaborate? Does one become specialized and one become general? Because once you create a state police, line side by side with the federal police, then you're going to think around jurisdiction and how you demarcate them. And oftentimes, the state police become the real police that deals with everyday issue, and the federal police might just deal with. In Nigeria, federal offenses are limited, unlike in the US and elsewhere.
Now, funding has been raised as a major challenge. Do most Nigerian states have the financial capacity to sustain state police if it's eventually created?
Very good question. And there have been many arguments against state police. I mean, historically, the notion that you might be decentralizing dictatorship, decentralizing oppression. So the fact that states are police command is state, not federal, does not in any way have a curative, dimension. It doesn't change it. It doesn't make it more human friendly. It doesn't even make it efficient necessarily. So people argue that maybe we're going to have, instead of one inefficient, corrupt police, we're going to have 37 inefficient, corrupt police. We're also the federal government usually exercises some restraint in using the police because of the political institutions in the federal level, the National Assembly, the courts are much more, they can fight back. In the states today, the institutions of political accountability are dead and buried. So when you create a state police with the state governor acting like the president, giving instructions, the fear is that you're going to have, real tyranny down there. And then funded, finance. Are there going to be police with no capacity to move around their hinterlands and rural areas to stop crime? Are there going to be police where their uniforms will be torn up and down, they can't replace it? So these are very important conversations we should have, actually, and say, let's run the numbers. What does it take to maintain a police force? And which states in Nigeria can do that? Should we even have that? Or should we just decentralize and reform the Nigerian police with local controls and maybe community engagement and structures for community consultation? So I'm not too sure that the argument for state police has been very compelling and has won over the cynicisms against it. So what we're going to have is that maybe by the time we move into this, we discover that typical of the way we have done this in Nigeria, we have given many things to states and they can deliver. We've got UBEC, UBE. States are supposed to fund federal government. Many states have not funded anything and they're not able to, leverage and use the federal government grant for basic education. And that's why today also you have 10 million and more young Nigerian children out of school. We are the leading in the world. So if you look at the basic services that states have been asked to do, very few states have been very excellent in them. And then the question is, if you now ask states to run police, apart from the idea of oppression, tyranny, what about the efficiency, effectiveness of it? Can they really fund, not just financially, also create bureaucracy? You see, public services, especially law enforcement, is backstopped by efficient and strong bureaucracy. Do they have, and can they quickly, ramp up their bureaucratic capabilities to, service and support efficient law enforcement efforts at the level of state? Because once you have a state police, the federal police has no more jurisdiction to do anything there if it works properly. So that's the question we ask ourselves. How many of these states will commit in a sustainable manner to finance and support with the level of professionalism and technical competence a police force worth the name? That's a conversation we have not had. And typical of everything in Nigeria is like a wave. People lash on the sound bites, on the feel-good factor, but don't really bother about really the grind, the delivery, the real work, and ask whether we are primed to really undertake this. My view is that we have to have a much more strategic committee, look into this at the federal level, involving the federal government, state governors, the legislators, experts, real experts, not just law enforcement people. These are, it's organizational, it's about management, it's about leadership, it's about institutional reform. Those experts, we're not about gun and bombs. So it's not a police operational affair, it's about design of institution. You need to have public sector experts talk about it.
Well, always well said. And before we let you go, I just want to get your opinion on, critics saying that this might be a classic stalling tactic. We do know that there is a constitutional barrier to any of these discussions even going forward. So with that, the studying and deliberating and constituting of a committee, some might say that the federal government is just trying to keep that conversation of state police alive without actually surrendering any power and pushing forth any kind of constitutional amendment and reform. What do you make of that?
I think it's a credible, argument. I mean, it might be like a conspiracy theory, but it's really credible because primarily, look, the National Assembly has not moved much on this. in the last assembly under Ekuremadu. He led strong, was part of this as a deputy speaker. He led a strong onslaught to have state police. It collapsed at the final stage. We have to go to states to get, consent to amend the constitution. It didn't fly. So we will take it more seriously when, for example, the National Economic Council meets, approves it, set up a committee to work it out, a National Assembly, a real bill goes to first, second hearing on both houses and gets to public hearing stage, then we know that that's really something tangible. Because if you don't take out the constitutional definition of Nigerian police under the exclusive list, then you can't, you're not yet moving forward. So when you deal with the constitutional side, then the question will now be, how do we then establish a state police system? And then we bring the experts and begin to look at models that fit with our own local context. So first big thing to move would be the consensus with presidency and the state government under the Executive Economic Council. The second big thing that moves, and the main thing is we see bill, maybe executive bill, in the both houses and going through quick passage, first, second, and then to the third stage, which is the stage for deliberation and consideration. At that point, you will see an unmistakable, political will on both the national and sub-national governments to deal with this constitutionally. And then the Nigerian police could start now looking at what it means for them and how they could put themselves in a better shape to easily transition when they are called to do so.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, it's always a delight to have you on Newsday. Thank you so much.